So something different today. This piece of rock has been on our nursery, I think since, I would say, the late 1990s. I used to go to Japan with my dear wife on buying trips since 1986 or 87, and we always used to go around visiting different nurseries, and you get to know the people pretty well. I saw this piece of rock, which apparently is an antique piece of rock. They don't make these things anymore. It's a Japanese volcanic rock. If you come close, you see all these pores. So this is the actual lava that comes out of the Japanese mountains, and they form these large rocks. So it's very light. It's not heavy at all. So one strong person could lift it, but two people can easily lift it. If it was granite or sandstone, it would take about 4 men to lift, but it's fairly light. Now, this is a little house carved on it. It's not any old rock that you would get in Japan. So on one of these visits to this particular guy's nursery, I saw it, but he refused to sell it because he says it's been with our family for 2 or 3 generations, so he didn't want to part with it. So that was in the late 90s. So every year I used to visit, I used to say, how about selling me this rock? Finally he relented. But this poor gentleman, I think he passed away when I went to Japan in 2007. My agent told me that he had passed away. So bless his soul, this rock is with me now, and I haven't the heart to sell it to anyone. So what I'm going to do, you will notice that there are pockets of crevices like this where the trees are going to be planted. And I can show you what I've already done to this. If you home in closely, I will show you what it is. So what we did was to use a drill, and we drilled holes, but because this is a very porous and light rock, I've just drilled some screws with some roll plugs and tied pieces of wire there to fasten the trees. So that is the first thing you need to do when you do a root over rock. Sometimes people just use a wet clay called muck or keto or whatever the Japanese call it, but there are all different ways of doing it. So you can put like small trees there if you wish, or bigger ones. The natural sort of thing you would incline to do is to try and put some junipers which look dramatic, something like that, to come over the mountain. So that is a possibility. You can tease the roots a bit. So that is the sort of thing you can do with it. So you've got to choose the right material for this. So these trees will have to be, once we've chosen the right tree, we will then have to wire them and refine them so that they look natural. The scale is very important, and these little pockets here, we would use very small junipers in there to make it look nice. I've sometimes used small cotoneasters as well. But knowing me, I never take everything for granted. So I thought, what if I did something else? So something else means I've got all these larches. We grow larches in all sorts of different ways. We have larches which are very rapid and forced to grow, but these larches I've had for about 10, maybe even 15 years. So these larches are pretty old, but they're not allowed to grow tall. I keep cutting them back to keep them small. And they are kept specially for making forest groups. I've already showed you one video where I did a group on a rather unusual slate planting. So I can try different larches together and see what it looks like. This is just ordinary organic compost. I think it was the original peat, because about 10 years ago we were using a lot of peat. So here you are. So you can get the root ball down to quite a small size. Although they have just come out into leaf, there is still time to play around with it without affecting the health of the tree too much. So we will try and get several trees together in there and see what they look like. don't have to plant it in acadam or anything. This is just ordinary garden compost. Larches are one of my favorite trees. They're so tough, so resilient, and I still tell my students or customers that if you kill a larch, you must be doing something wrong. They are virtually impossible to kill. They are so tough. So I'm going to try and get at least 3 trees in there. I'm just trying to see how they relate before I proceed to tie them in. So this is just trying, this is not the final thing. I'm just going to try it. Normally people will just put 1 tree, but I'm going to try putting 3, 4 trees, or even 5 trees to see how they look. I love experimenting. If you don't experiment and try new ideas, there's no fun. So doing new things is always challenging, exciting. This is how they come out of the pots. While they're growing in the pots, we don't bother to do much except to keep them well watered. In the summer, and of course with the strange weather we've been having the last 2-3 years, you get extremes of weather. In the summer it gets too hot and too dry, and water becomes a problem. So keeping these trees is quite a challenge. But there you are. It's still alive. So I think 3 would fit in there. If they fit, I will then proceed to wire the trees individually, shape the trees, and see what happens. So this is what you would find on a mountainside. I think this is more interesting than putting a single juniper. So this is something new. So without proceeding to that side, let me see what would happen if I just give them a very light trim. Mind you, I'll take these apart and wire them. You see, I'm going to wire them so that the branches hang downwards with a bit of gin as well. So all these will be wired down like that, like that. So that is that one. I'm keeping them in position so that I know exactly what to trim. And if you keep them well trimmed, they should be able to remain on this rock for at least 3, 4, even 5 years. And then, of course, if they get too big, I'll have to think of taking it out. Otherwise, they may eventually burst the pot or burst the rock. I want height as well. So, as I say, this is exactly how you would find these things growing on a high mountain, several trees like that. So each one will be distinct and recognizable. There's a bit of gin there, I will keep it. So there's 3 trees there. I think that would fit, like so. And you notice I'm still maintaining that triangular pattern or triangular shape. I'm just picking trees out at random. I haven't chosen anything in particular. As the trees come up, I'm just going to use it. You see they've been in the pot so long, there's moss growing on it as well. Those of you who are familiar with larch will know that in the natural habitats where they grow on these peat bogs, where the soil is very much like this, absolutely peaty soil, bog-like conditions, wet, damp. Okay, another tall guy, like so. See, now it's still in scale with the little house there. So there's another tree out there. Yeah, see, this part has died, but the sides should grow. You see, so the natural gin. So you will believe me when I tell you that they are not forced in any way. These trees would be at least 10 years old, maybe more than 10 years, because time passes so quickly. So we don't rush them at all. We have a lot of deer on our land, so I'm not sure whether deer nibble them, but whatever it is, see the character. I mean, just in a bonsai pot, that would make a delightful little bonsai. As long as I can get soil in there, it should be okay. I'm just putting it at random to see what the effect is like. And these little ones here, these larches are probably a bit big. I can't find a small one. In natural settings, if you go to the mountains, you'll find larches that do grow out of little pockets of gravel and in rock crevices. So this is a very natural situation that we find ourselves in. See, that would even go in there like that. So I will play around with it. So I think that is the basic composition, which is different, very different. I don't want to hide the beauty of the rock. Many people, even when they make root over rock plantings, they hide the beauty of the rock. The beauty of the rock needs to be shown as much as possible to be admired. So this is what we're trying to do, not hide this. So we'll now proceed to do little bits of detail wiring to each of these trees, and then we will set it up again. 3, 2, 5, 6, 7 trees. And I've tied the trees in. Now just put a little bit of moss. And we've put our standard bonsai mix, which has some akadama, because akadama will be very clayey in texture. So that will help to bind the soil. But I do want it to breathe as well. I don't want it to be too heavy that it can't breathe. Look at this lovely moss. And then if we want to put the moss in position, we can do what we call a hairpin. So, you know, like how the ladies in the old days used to wear hats, or even their hair, I don't know how they do it, but if you do a hairpin like this, and that can hold the moss in position, like so, you see? So that's the hairpin principle. Usually people put moss just before an exhibition. And here we're doing it for the appearance. And these are little cascade trees. I've wired them so that they look like cascade. I think these I will have to pin, but I just want to complete this video. And I will just give it a final trim. I haven't trimmed it. I didn't wire excessively because I don't want to make it look too artificial. So I've only wired this little branch. I've left these dead bits as gin. So this is how trees grow naturally. And this one I will shorten a little bit. So this is what we call the pine tree image. If you go into the English or Scottish countryside, you will see our Scots pines growing in exactly this sort of fashion. Tall, stately trees. I could have wired it, but I shan't. I don't think it needs it. And look at this, if it was a little plant growing there, like a bit of moss or fern, that would be exciting. So it didn't even take us 15 minutes to do this composition. Not even 15 minutes, and look at it. I was originally, as we showed you, going to use these very sophisticated Itoigawa junipers, just put 2, but somehow the scale would look wrong. You know, however beautiful these trees are, I could have put just 2, but it wouldn't look right. But because the scale of these trees is right, they're small, it makes this structure look like a real mountain with trees growing on the mountain top. So if we come close and home in, you can get the detail of these trees and the house. So you can really imagine yourself on a mountainside.